Today's guest is David Homan. He rebuilt a major arts institution after Bernie Madoff wiped it out, incubated a film company inside Ray Dalio's family office, and co-authored a USA Today best-selling book. And he's built a global network of over 2,500 super connectors spanning family offices, philanthropists, and some of the most private capital circles on earth. But here's what separates him from the typical networking guru. He doesn't just collect contacts. He engineers the right introduction at the right moment at scale. Today, we're going to be talking about the system behind building that trust from people that don't need anything from you, why a lot of high achievers are playing the relationship completely wrong, and how someone from a middle class background ends up inside some of the most exclusive rooms in the world. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Lee. I'm so pleased to be here.
So tell us, what's been the most significant lesson that you've had this past year?
I'll tell you, it's a hard one. When my book came out last August, I got the news it was a bestseller. My co-author, Noah, and I were super thrilled. I had an entire fall lined up of events in New York and DC and Chicago and Miami and LA. And then my dad got sick and we thought it was a little something, turned out to be a lot. He then went into hospice and he passed this last December.
Sorry to hear that.
And thank you. And I'd been hosting every single event I'd ever done, hundreds and hundreds around the country. And I called up friends in each of these cities and I said, can you be me and can you do this? Can you be me and can you do that? Can you greet somebody? Can you interview them? Can you set up the food? Can you check in? Can you ensure there's follow-up? And, about 80 of my friends in my network stepped up. They ran the events as if I wasn't ever supposed to be there. And the lesson I learned, the beautiful lesson was, I had built enough of a community of really intentional, amazing, high-powered people that the events didn't need me there.
Great. That's great. And I think you hit on a very important point is that us as entrepreneurs, we typically like to just do everything until we're forced not to, right? And, it took a moment like that to really just recognize the strength of your connections, which is a great silver lining. Go ahead.
I'll just say I appreciate you recognizing that. I knew the strength of my connections. What I didn't know is that I did not have to be there to have the same high level effect. Because that system I bit that we'll talk about, the way my events run, the language that I use, the language that people had now, on my network forced to read in my book, because to be in my network and stay my friend, you had to at least tell me you bought the book. You didn't actually have to buy it. You just had to placate me, so I thought it might go somewhere.
Yeah.
But that language wasn't my language. It was the shared language I came up with so many people who feel the same pain of most of the world not respecting relationships and their value the way that we do. And because I stood for that, it was easy for them to stand in for me.
That's interesting. So can you just give the audience kind of like a, nutshell snapshot, like your background? I'm sure I missed out on some important points on that read-in just now.
Those important points are all like hard things in my life that like I really loved getting through. I grew up in Gainesville, Florida, where people know it for Tom Petty and Gatorade and Emmett Smith or Tim Tebow. My dad was a college professor teaching Shakespeare. I thought I'd go to the University of Florida. I realized really soon after I should not, because I would be 11 years old for my entire life, being back home with my parents, being prominent in the community. Got to New York through Bard College. New York has been my home now 25 years. And everything that might seem sophisticated I do now, I started in arts and philanthropy that got into the world of wealth and impact. And it's all been based on a series of very fortuitous introductions that now I've seen the patterns in and built an entire global system out of.
So tell us about how you kind of made that happen. I mean, I think it sounds great. I mean, especially like for the viewer, they're like, oh, wow, that sounds great. But like, it's not easy to do what you did, right? There was a lot of kind of connecting the dots and a lot of trusting the process, right? In doing what you do.
I trusted my instincts, and my instincts were that the way people held events, I did not like. That the way people met me and put their card in my face, I thought was naive. You should hold your contact information for when the person is worthy of taking more time with you, not the hope they'll follow up. And I looked at all the things that we look at traditional networking, and I did the opposite. And I did it for several years. And then all of a sudden, my network was coming to me, asking me for help they could not get. And that's when I realized that I had built a network of networks. I was a quote, a connector of connectors, because the person I found most valuable at every event wasn't that tall dude in the beautiful suit with the microphone. It was the woman standing behind his shoulder, making sure he got there on time, making sure everyone in the room came. She was the one greeted the warmest. The guy was that alpha presence, and he was the reason the finance firm or the law firm or the family office was there, but she was the connector behind it all. And by supporting her with no strings attached, and then supporting her friends that I met through her, and on and on and on, I built this supernodal network of trust amongst the best people who can build trust across massive spans of business, influence, philanthropy, and impact.
Hmm. So tell us more about this network that you built. I mean, you started it from like kind of the arts world, and you sort of noticed that people are going about this whole thing wrong, and then what happened from there?
So I started in the arts, and I talked to everyone who was in the arts or was an arts philanthropist. It was horrible. They didn't want to give me money. They wanted money for the thing they were doing. They
Hmm.
were doing enough. And I realized there were so many people that I couldn't get access to and couldn't meet because I was building in that bubble. So the thing I tore apart, I got involved in people focused on climate change, sustainability, mental health. I've connected more friends who are focused on API and combating hate as a non-Asian than some of them have met in their own networks, because I've met friends who were cared about that through all these different spectrums. I regularly get calls from people who are executives in real estate companies and private equity and family office. I'm doing this deal. Do you know anyone else doing this type of deal who does shopping malls? I've never been in those spaces, but I focus on the connector in those spaces whose past life was as a DJ in their family office and knew people for my sustainability focused friends. So the more diverse that network, the more you focus on people who you care about as people. Seemingly, this is not the way you should network for business. You should focus on the sale, on who gets you to the right room. And I figured, well, why don't I just connect the people who are making those rooms, and their friend, because now I built trust with them, will be the exact one for me, or more importantly, possibly for you. And if that's enough, then the next call I get is from somebody you know that I didn't know could help me.
So in effect, you're connecting with the people that sort of behind the scenes or organize the event, right? They put together the guest list, and they're kind of just supporting the front man, so to speak. Is that right?
So that's one type of connector. That
Hmm.
connector in my book we call the shepherd or the shepherdess.
Hmm.
They are not the sheepdog. They are not that alpha, but they're the ones that make that event happen. There are others that are keynote speakers and best-selling authors, and they run massive conferences with 40,000 people. There are other people who are sort of like that puppet master type, where like they have the ear of Mike Milken, they have the ear of Barry Sternlicht, and they have the ear of all these amazing billionaires because they're their peer, they're their friend. They're also a billionaire. But what they are is they're one of the most intentional, just very direct connectors. There's a lot of different variations to it. There's also a friend, you would look at her in a room. She is quiet. She's unassuming. She's about 4'10" with heels, and people dismiss her because she doesn't have the look of somebody powerful. And then when I call her up and I go, hey, I need to get an ask to Bradley Cooper for something, or Anne Hathaway, she goes, well, what is it? Not can she, just what?
Mm.
And so we dismiss people in that world of connection, thinking that the way to do it is to showboat it, to talk
Hmm.
about who you know, to how successful you are, what rooms you get to. And as the more I focused on all the varieties of the people who truly just want to build a relationship trust first, I found there were 8 different types of those connectors. And then there was the ultimate one, which I would now proudly say I am, which is a super connector. I'm a combination of many different types of a connector. And I have a really crazy diverse network that spreads the globe in multiple industries. And as I get to know you better, or anyone who's listening, and I think I can be helpful, I just figure out the approach. I message a friend, and it's either them or their friend's friend that's the exact right person when I can do it correct.
Now, how much of this do you think is attributable to the fact that you're in New York? Because you know what you said, I really resonate with, and I mean, I moved in from Boston like a few years ago, and like definitely sense that energy here. People are willing to connect and like help each other out with like not necessarily like a want and something in return.
New York was my zoo to finally get uncaged from it, so to speak, and thrive. It was not the community I grew up in, but I run events in London, in Toronto, and in Boston, in Miami, LA, Austin. Like they're all different environments, but generally these are hubs, really super nodes and networks where people come in from all around the world, and there's that cosmopolitan mix of different people. So yes, 100% like big city life taught me the necessity for connecting, because the life that I grew up in, what we call it down in the deep South, which is where I grew up in Northern Florida, we call it the good old boys network. And
Mm,
unless you're one of the good old boys and you look like one of the good old boys, you don't get anything. You don't
mm.
get the favor. You don't get the call. You don't get the access. And my goal was, how do you figure this out? How do you orchestrate it? Where within my community, those who have the clearest purpose and intent and needs, regardless of their status, can have the same power and be recognized for that relationship power as that person who grew up as the kid of one of those good old boys, but then made it to New York with me.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I think when we move to places like New York or more like metropolitan cities, like you realize that the world is bigger than you think, and but like there's no reason to gatekeep certain things, right? I think so. For me, I grew up in Asia, and it really felt like a hierarchy, kind of like this is your position in the system, and like that's all you can be. Rather than like so when I came to America, it's like you could be anyone you want to as long as you bring value to people, they'll find value in it.
It's 100% true. I was fortunate. My father was one of the first American invited to teach in the People's Republic of China in the
Mm,
mid 80s, like 2 years
mm,
before Tiananmen Square. So I went when I was 7 and my brother was 4 turning 5. So that was the height of the one child policy, with the first American invited to teach Western values with 2 boys. It was a real interesting culture to understand. And then we had teaching students come every summer. So I was immersed in Chinese cultures till I was 16.
wow.
And so what we learned, right, what my mom learned, we kept learning was that there, in that culture in particular, like we wanted to go see a show and we weren't told, no, there are no tickets. We were told, we're working on tickets. We'll get back to you later. Because it would be dishonorable to tell us, you can't go see this. It's been sold out for months.
Mm,
And so I started, that was my first glimpse to understand that every culture has different nuances. And as
mhm,
great as the American culture is of the can do, you can do everything, you can do everything if the people around you with the power will let you do it. And you don't see the subtleties of what limits that unless you're being limited.
mm.
So there are hierarchies everywhere, but to get around the power structures to get access, it all comes back to story. It all comes back to having done something, an act of generosity for somebody else, for which, as they tell that story, that respect that you have earned gives you a much different access than you had before.
Yeah, that's such an important point. I think so. When I was kind of just learning the game, I mean, I'm in real estate, and I was fortunate enough to just interact with people of so many different walks of life. From like different backgrounds, socioeconomic statuses, and like I think for like wealthy people, successful people, like there really isn't much that you can offer that they want, at least initially, right? But if you have that energy of like, yeah, I mean, look, I'm happy to offer you value. I don't want anything in return. They kind of see you like you understand the game, and like they open up to you more.
It's 100% right. And, a lot of the philanthropic world that I touched within New York in particular was real estate. And what I did as an executive running this global charity is I went out, hat in hand, befriended you, asked if you wanted to support what we did. And I kept being told no all the time. It's the same when you're raising money for a business, especially a startup. When the law of averages is for every 100 you talk to, you get two. I averaged 40 to 70% success because the intro was made warmly. There was an opt in for it. And almost all the time, about 85% of that time, because I can tell you the system works because it worked for me, the person would not only opt in, but the person who introduced them, you would never predict could be that the person who would open up that door. So help a friend who tells her roommate that I helped her. That roommate makes an introduction to her uncle. And the thing I helped with had nothing to do with philanthropy. It was some introduction to somebody in San Diego they wanted to meet related to like a kid's birthday party. And the next thing I know, the CEO of a major toy company was inviting me to an event, became a donor to my charity, became a friend for decades. And that happened through what we would tell in the business world. It was non-predictive behavior. Like you could not correlate city that didn't relate to this person that I didn't think had the relation to the alpha I needed. And I had that person on a prospect list. But I did not know, Leo, that I could get to that person until I separated out the idea that I can help you if you can help me. And I just focused on, can I be helpful? Can I build enough trust for you to tell me something for which you might be grateful for? And if I do enough of that systematically while asking for that to be valued, the introduction, the time, what I could offer, eventually it all started to swirl together in a way that my access became insane. I didn't realize at that point it was the super connector network. I just happened to do that person after person who then goes, you know where you should speak? I'm a managing partner at PwC. Why don't you go talk to 60 of our executives about how you do that? And that's a talk I have coming up in a couple of weeks in New York. And all of these executives, which I know are a lot of the type of people in your audience, these are people who are successful in business, but they need more. They've achieved, but they need to achieve even greater. They know their potential. And I'm sitting here to say, you don't call somebody up and ask how they are because your secretary told you it was their daughter's birthday. And you don't go to somebody and you invite them because you got box seats to a Rangers game. What you actually do is you figure out the thing that no one's offered to help them with. Very least they feel heard. Middle case, down the line, you can connect the dots. But when you do this to the extent that I do it several thousand times a year, now my random world is talking with somebody like I did in Chicago just the other day, who another family member is a prominent politician on this planet, and I have somebody to help him.
Hmm.
And I was bored with none of this, none of these powerful relationships. I built it organically, the only way to build trust, which is to take action on behalf of somebody else and expect nothing in return.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's pretty incredible how you're able to build that, and at the same time, too, I think it just goes to show that like the majority of the world, they just have it wrong, right? Like, we were brought up in this kind of system that we're like, okay, like this is the cause and effect. Maybe we're in corporate for a while, and like this is what we're taught. Like we just don't know how to build relationships. I can't tell you. So like, I mean, I'm decently active on places like LinkedIn, right? Like the number of people that just like they slide into your DMs and they like throw a pitch. I'm like, it's just like it's so off compared to like the people that I would actually do business with. And like those connections just came from like random places. Like I can't even tell like how I met this one person, right?
So, I mean, let's not even get into the LinkedIn and what even a messaging there is worth. I wish it was better.
Yeah.
But here's the thing I'd say, right? Like that dichotomy of what exists in most people's minds is that we think it's okay to approach people in the way we've been taught is the norm to be effective to network. And yet we all collectively cringe when it's done to us.
Mm.
So you and I are at a real estate event where I'm networked in with like the family behind Related and Vornado. And I happen to have known so many of them over my philanthropic years. And I come in and I go, hey, this is Leo. He's a LinkedIn first degree connection of mine. Does that mean anything to anyone? Right? If I say, hey, like Leo did a podcast with me, he was really insightful because he talked about coming from a culture in Asia where everything felt blocked. And then in this land of opportunity, he started to understand that what he should do first and foremost is bring people on his podcast he can learn from. To bring people in that if not because then by networking to them through the podcast, he can do business with them, but he can give something and share his insight and elevate them and him together. Next question out of that person's mouth is, well, who else has been on your podcast? Do I know anybody? Would you have me on it? Or like, where are you actually from? Like, I grew up in this culture. It was different here. And all of a sudden you were talking as a peer
Hmm.
as opposed to that networking opportunity. And to get to that story, and I know I'm being a little more long-winded here, but just
Yeah.
bear with me, please, everyone.
Yeah.
We have to understand that if we just inverted this and we approach people the way we wish happened to us, it is the simplest hack in the world. Because, Leo, when was the last time somebody called you up and thanked you for something you did?
Almost never.
When was the last time somebody asked you what you really needed and you felt that they meant it?
Can't recall.
And these people are sliding into your DMs trying to sell you a deal. You're in real estate. You're figuring out what to build next, what to buy, what happens with that sale. You're dealing with New York real estate. None of it's small. Even the small stuff is bigger than like the big thing in a
Hmm.
small town.
Yeah.
And the two things that could get me into your world that way would be to build enough trust to figure out how I can help you, and then to say, thank you for helping me, right? It seems so normal. And yet your answers were, neither of those two things happened to me. And if that was the norm, we would exist in a whole different world of connection and intentional networking and community building that spirals in the right way. Because I do this now on a global scale. And on a normal day now, abnormal, weird things happen in my life where somebody goes, you should meet this person. They're one of the top 50 guys in AI. And I meet this guy and like, it's this bromance because we're both divorced. We both are super active dads. We're both trying to build trust in this family office space. And he's hacked one part of it, but I wrote the book on the other. And all of a sudden, like sparks fly because a mutual friend said, hey, you guys will like each other. Take a little time. No expectation. Just, I trust both of you. Learn how you can build trust.
Yeah. I think it's so funny that you say that because I think you're absolutely right in that nowadays it's so easy to just appear a certain way. I think people have like cracked it or something. I don't know, like stuff on marketing, like when you're looking at a pitch deck, like it looks a certain way, but like how do you know that it's truly got the goods, so to speak? So like for me, as an investor, like if I'm looking at a deal, like how do I know who's in charge of the deal? Like, do they have what it takes to run the business plan? I mean, in a very abstract way, it's like the jockey is more important than the horse. So in this way, it's like not so much like what are you, but who are you? I think that's always important.
But many people, right? We live in that world of resumes. I've been sent thousands of decks where everyone in it, I was like, oh my God, they achieved the world. They were an ex-employee at Facebook. They were part of this. They sold this thing. They were part of that hospitality group. Like everyone presents and talks themselves up as if everything they've done has been the best ever.
Yeah. So
It's not possible.
right. Yeah. And so a couple questions for you, David, is when you're like talking to people, like how do you know that the person is worth talking to, like building a relationship with? I mean, it's great to give everyone equal time of day, but obviously, like we only have 24 hours. We want to serve who we serve better, and like we have to be selective.
Two founding principles in my methodology are curiosity and vulnerability. Guarantee you those aren't taught as the very part of like business networking at Sloan or anywhere else, right? I am instantly curious to other people. I ask them questions. If they feel really good that I'm interested in them and they keep answering my questions and ask nothing about me, I quickly extricate myself from that conversation because the right person is going to be curious back. But if I have enough of an instinct, and we're talking in a family office conference, we're talking in a founders and startup conference, and angel investors in the business world. I'm not talking about the arts world or just some event where I know everyone. I am open about losing my father. I'm open about the fact that I'm going to have two teenage girls in the house soon. I am open about the fact that my son has aspirations to be a basketball star, but me topping off at 5'8", like it's just not going to happen. And like wanting to have your 9-year-old's dreams not crushed by the fact he's going to be a medium height at best. How you respond to that is a window into your soul, or whether you're willing to open up that window for me. And in the first 5 minutes of conversation, if I feel that it's one sided or the person has no empathy or is just opportunistic, I wait to see if they exhibit anything back that could be remotely humane. And I also wait to see if they're going to judge me. And very often in these environments, because I am of average height, look too young for my age, and I don't showboat what I've done, I get dismissed all the time. And then later on, somebody looks me up and they go, "Hey, what was it like working with Ray Dalio? Like, did you work in the family office?" I go, "Sorta." "Did you work for Bridgewater?" I go, "No." They're like, "Who'd you work for?" "Ray's son Paul and his wife Christina and Ray." Like, directly for several years. Like, I built a company directly with them. And if they were dismissive to me, I don't need to continue that conversation. I don't even need to explain any of that. The person who's
Yeah.
curious goes, not what was it like? I've read principles. The person who's curious goes, well, how did learning from working with somebody like Ray affect what you do now? And then I know I have a winner, because that type of question isn't about the access to somebody that I honestly can't call up every single day and send something to, or the family office. But the person who asked that question lets me share insight into everything I've built now that I literally learned from working for one of the most influential business leaders on the planet. And I learned it through a school of hard knocks. I learned it from like him calling me up on FaceTime where I was putting my kids to bed during COVID and needing to have something addressed then, and me just pausing and telling him and his team what I could do, what I needed, and also having my really spunky older kid, my girl at the time, literally once go, "Ray, my dad's reading me a story. Can you call him back in 20 minutes?" For which Ray, who's also just this amazingly humble guy, goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Your dad can call back when bedtime's done."
That's
So like
great.
there's a humaneness of how we do this, and then there's an opportunistic way. We smell that opportunistic way, yet we somehow think others don't smell it when we're doing it.
You're so right, and I think the way that I approach things, and I thought I was relatively unique, is just like I put people first. I kind of aggressively set people like I don't put people on pedestals. I think that's like one big thing that I've sort of like deconditioned myself off of. Like we're just people. Like we all have different experiences. We all have like the different 24 hours, like different upbringings, but there's ways that we can connect and bring value to each other, like just fulfill each other's lives, right? And I think some people they view it from like the bottom up approach. They're like, okay, where are you in relation to me, and like how do you get me to where I want to get to?
Yeah. So I was with a good friend in Chicago last night who loves to live large and he loves to eat well. It's just a huge part of his life. But he was actually asking me about one of the men who was like really like a second father to me. This guy, Bill Schwartz, was the chair of the foundation that I led for 14 years. And when I met Bill and he asked me to lunch, I thought, okay, I'm meeting this mega millionaire. He's the chair of a philanthropic board. Like, where are we going to go in New York? I went to this place called Cafe Metro. And we sat down and we got these to-go sandwiches and like wrapped deli paper. And he's like, the tuna salad is really good here. And it's like $8.95 tuna salad was actually really good. The time spent was the value. It wasn't going to some fancy restaurant where everything was in some puff pastry or like essence of, to feel like because I could eat with somebody like that, I could someday become superior. The reality was a quiet little nook in a non-pretentious place where I had 3 hours with this man to befriend him. And literally, he changed a huge amount of my life and gave me the confidence to be who I was in New York. So New York didn't crush me. And all that started with a lunch, which was a tuna salad sandwich on rye at a random New York deli.
That's great that you still remember that exact one too. So I have to ask, David, just a half step back on working for Ray Dalio or working with Ray's family. Like, what was that like? What did he view differently than like most other people that you know?
So I had the living, breathing embodiment of principles and everything that he's written. And I read the books. I mean, I'd known actually Ray and his two of his kids for like just 2 years before they brought me on to work with them. I'd met them through a board that I now chair. So we were actually like family friends. My kids went to his grandkids' birthday parties, and my daughter did a sack race with his grandson. And like, they're still friends. My second day on the job, second day, there's a problem with one project that they've been working on. And now I've come in as the VP to help lead and build this company. And I take full responsibility. I start to figure out what happened. And Ray's response after a week of figuring this out is that's not enough. And I got a little defensive. Big mistake. My job wasn't on the line. Everyone knew this wasn't my fault. And he said to me, here's the lesson you got to learn. You have to take ownership as if it was completely your fault and everything is on the line, or you won't see the true solution to it. And I went back and I came up with a solution. It became a strategy, became an underpinning of the company because I was pushed harder than I've ever been pushed to take ownership, to triangulate, and to figure out every way I could to be supportive of the vision that couldn't be my vision. It had to be the vision for how we built a company focused on commercial film. And
So what you end up doing there? Like you were helping them build like the media arm, like the animations that you see.
so both Paul Dalio and his wife Christina are incredible filmmakers. Paul's also an amazing musician and writer. And again, unfortunately, because you can talk about the greatness of what happens, right? I took my job running this arts foundation, and 3 years in, the finances invested from the early 90s were all lost to the Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme. And then I switched that after 14 years of running this organization to get what I thought was my next dream job, building a company to get films into Hollywood to have impact in climate change and mental health and social justice. And then COVID hit and Hollywood paused. And so you couldn't get things made. The things that you were done couldn't get finished. Like the whole world was in disarray. And my job was to figure out the strategy to incubate a company that could allow both Paul and Christina to be commercially successful and creatives. So we did a lot of really amazing work. We built out a strategy. We really got to the right point for the next several years. And then, due to some unfortunate tragedy in their family, the right choice was to move on. And so, after a very kind conversation and staying on as an advisor, I left and built my own business, which is now what I've run to this day, 6 years later, where the work I do in community building, the thought leadership, I take that model that I really built by working with them. And I do that with different family offices and funds and investors and philanthropists and B Corps to scale their impact and to teach them and to coach them how to build the most important, meaningful relationships they can that are trust based for the long term.
So yeah, that's interesting. And so you're right now you're basically teaching people how to be better human beings and to connect better.
I'm trying to teach people that the work you have to do yourself translates directly into the expectations you should hold those around you to be much more intentional and purposeful. And that as you look at this as a systematic approach, what can eventually come is what happened to me when I built this by accident and suddenly was responsible for over 85% of the donations coming into my charity. When I did this working with Luna Clips, the film company, and I built hundreds of ties into Hollywood without using the Dalio name to get into it, but the network that I've built. And so my consultancy, which is my main bread and butter, is that work as a coach, strategist, and connector. I make direct live intros. I'm a partner, not just some theorist going, well, here's how you connect better and go off, Leo, and build some cool new real estate connections. Like I do it with everyone that I work with. And that system is now translated into the launch of what will be my first tech company, ideally launching later this summer, called Soar Connect, which is the systems approach to rebuild the world through trust. I'm a broken record with everything I do. So everything I've talked about, I figured out the AI augmented version, not to replace people doing this, but to give us the toolkit and the ease by which we can measure and understand who trusts us, who do we trust, and what can happen from that as we build a larger trust-based network.
And, as you said this, David, it just reminds me of what Steve Jobs says that the dots never connect when you're looking forward, but when it looks back, it makes complete sense.
I'll give an example for this. So as a composer, I've been very fortunate. No one really ever has met a living classical composer. Maybe everyone listening is going, what? This guy writes classical music? But if you say to the device that Bezos built, play the music of David Homan, I won't because it will play right now in my living room. You can listen to over 7 of my albums, improv, string quartets, symphonic, one classical rock album. And in college, a close friend of mine was going to lose the security deposit on her rental, and I lent her a vacuum cleaner. Her parents were grateful because they didn't want to lose money on the rental. We stayed in touch. A few years later in New York, they were hosting some party. It was actually a big, swanky dance party for a lot of philanthropists. And they wanted her to have some friends there. So they was like, what about the vacuum guy? And she was like, David. So they called me up. No awareness that my world was in classical music and therefore I should meet people in dance. Just I was the vacuum guy. I met a former Joffrey dancer who was a choreographer there. 2 years later, I had a ballet at the Joyce Theater in New York, one of the most important modern dance venues on the planet. And that happened through a 7-year series of events that culminated in lending a vacuum and then getting reviewed in the New York Times. So you cannot, as Jobs was correct, you cannot see this in a forward way. But in retrospect, you can look at the craziness of how it happens and know you shouldn't have approached it in a linear way in the first place.
So I'm a philosopher at heart. So, I love to just think about things. And I'm curious if you agree with this, that there's two kind of frequencies to life. There's the people that are very like overly logic based. They're very like go, 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 go. They're like the hustlers and stuff. And like, yeah, I mean, like you can get linear progression in what you do that way. But then there's the other kind that's like more just like very vibe based, like abundance, like they kind of surrender their expectations, everything, and like they're just open to what life has to offer. And somehow, some way, just like magic happens.
I was trying to teach my 8-year-old at the time how to throw a ball and hit something in the distance. And if you were going as a straight shooter throwing right at that, you miss every single time. If you actually get that broader perspective of like what arc it has to be, what speed, what the wind is, maybe you throw it to figure out how off you are and adjust your stance. And like you eventually like hit this bucket we were trying to throw something into. What you realize is that you can be directed and pointed and go that direction. At some point, you miss your mark because no one can point that full direction to end up in the right place. You could do it in sprints. And I do it. Like when I need to go after something, like I'm doing the next raise for my startup soon, like I have to go after it and I have to achieve that. But the thing that I've come to realize, having raised 2 successful rounds, 1.1 million to date from my friends and friends, because I have no family that can invest, and then my pre-seed, is that because of the community I built around me, when I then needed to sprint and to point in that direction, it was so much easier because I was in that direction with so many people rooting for me, calling me up, offering help. And what most founders do, what most business people do is that they, in a place of abundance, it's really great because they're feeling really good. And then in a place of need, they don't have the time to build what they need while they're raising, while they're trying to keep sales up, while they're trying to figure out if they've performed so well, why did the other person next to them get the job, get the raise, get the position? And in the end, the answer for all of it is trusted relationships.
So that leads me to the question. So how do you kind of make the ask? I mean, you've at some point like you've had to like be like, hey, consider donating, or like, hey, like invest in my company. Like how do you go about that?
So I call it the impact ask because the opposite you don't want to hear. If I say to you, hey, Leo, I'm raising for my startup. I need $750,000. Want to invest in my startup? What are you going to say? Don't say
I'll
yes,
think about
because
it.
for sake of this, you have to say, I think about it. I'll
Yeah.
get back to you, or just no if you're really kind. But like, you're going to say no because I didn't demonstrate my passion. I didn't talk about how it can be amplified. And if I do that right, Then I can actually have that person see whether they can be part of that journey, or if they know people, which is really the goal of most asks, that they know might align even more fully. So every event I do, I have two people get up on my stages. Sometimes they're just like in front of a bar. Last night was just a semicircle of 30 people at a law firm in Chicago. And I have people talk about for a minute, here is my passion. This is my purpose. Here is what happens when I achieve that. Can you see yourself with me? And when you make it that ask that way, you give people permission to dream with you, to see themselves in it, to go, hey, like this startup's not for me. But one of my friends, had a big exit when early employee in LinkedIn, and they love networking, and they know that those cold DMs that people slide into don't work for them either. Maybe they'll want to talk with you. Maybe they'll want to see that passion you just imbued into me that I can now share with them.
I like that. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing all the wisdom so far. I mean, I think the the common thread that I see is that the key to success, I think people don't think about how much mindset comes into play, right? They just think like, oh, I need to do this, I need to go to this school, I need to accomplish this. But no, I mean, like I think it's just like who you are. If you're a better human being, like you'll connect with other quality human beings, and good things will happen.
It's 100% right. I used to read when I used to get Newsweek delivered to my mailbox every week, and like I miss that. And I used to read like the obit page where you see all the significant people that in that past week have passed. You
Hmm.
never see the guy who did the biggest real estate deal. You never see the CEO of a pool company that did $1.2 billion in revenue and went national. You never see the person who achieved financial success, who got access or trumped on somebody else. Like what you see is the poet. You see the person who was a humanitarian and wrote a check to a battered women's shelter to get all these women back into their worlds, and no one ever knew it was them. You see the person who was a devoted, serviceman and served our country for years. You see the things that are legacy building. And none of those are the things that we measure as we try to achieve. We view those as ancillary, the things we do later in life. And the people that I think are the most intentional in doing it now love their lives more because there is a way to do both. You just have to choose to.
Hmm. I like that. So, in closing, David, thanks for all the wisdom that you share. I mean, who are you looking to meet? How can we help you? How can we learn more about you?
I hate asking for myself, even though I run a network where I make everyone ask for themselves. So my world is at this precipice, right? I've been doing this for 11 years, really 25. I wrote a best-selling book. I'm just getting out to do more of the speaker circuit. I keynoted an event for my friend's EO group down in Atlanta, and I got such a high score. It went to all the other groups, and I'm thinking, okay, well, like maybe people are going to say this guy's worth listening to. Let him bring in to speak to our groups. My tech company, I'm going to scale this because I believe that the systems approach to this will make it easier for all of us to blend that purpose intent and get what we need out of life too. And all of that comes from the core of what I do, which is I try to find every single connector I can, and I just hear them out and I offer them help. And if anyone listening knows that person who's a connector and that person doesn't know me, and even though I've been doing this in New York for decades, I don't know everyone. I always want to meet those people. I want to see how I can be helpful because they are the underpinnings of what makes our business world work. And there's no chief relationship officer. There's that connector is not celebrated the way I think they should. So the more people can help me bring those people out from the sidelines of the shadows to be celebrated for how much we need them to find the best deal, to meet the right trusted co-investor, to get to the firm to staff up when we raise our Series B. That's the right firm, not the one that their friend John knows. All of that, the more intentional it can be, the more my life works because I live a life of service to connectors.
Well, excellent. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, David. Appreciate all your wisdom, and any one final piece for the listener.
Yeah. So we'll just assume everyone listening here has never, ever heard me before. And if you have, do this again. I will tell you all that the community you have around you is stronger than you think. But the same way, Leo, that I asked if anyone had ever called to thank you up and you couldn't think of the last time, if every single person listening thought of one person still living who made something substantial happen in their life by bringing them into the right room, making the right call, sending the right note, whatever it might be, and everyone simply called that one person up and told them thank you, what happens from that will change that relationship and how you see the others. If you do that 3 times a week for several months, more opportunity will come to you than the last 2 years, because it is a simple change that from that can show your true intent, because a gracious person is the most remembered person of that week because of how rare it is any of us ever get thanked.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming on, David.
It's been a pleasure. I appreciate everyone listening. And Leo, I really appreciate all the work you do. And I'm so glad to help you promote the next part of your journey too.